Everyone, welcome to episode 6 of Mind Planning Matters. Now, if you've watched the past few, you've heard this all before, so I'm going to make it quick this time, right? This is the fourth and last part of a presentation all around why the industry should be interested in stochastic scheduling. So if you've just chimed in for this episode for some reason, episode 6, just go back to episode 3 and start at that one.
And so what's the answer? I think the answer is that we introduce all this risk into our operations. And it's time for us to stop ignoring it, stop burying our heads in the sands to some extent and hoping that it's going to go away or whatever. And instead, to start actually building variability or risk. And so I should, as I said earlier, I should start using that word risk more rather than variability. But to start actually building risk into our mind planning. Now that is known as stochastic scheduling or probabilistic scheduling. When I was a young planning engineer a long time ago, I don't know that I'd even heard the words deterministic or stochastic or probabilistic. And they knew nothing to me until sort of a few years back. And so let's just quickly talk about stochastic scheduling and what it is. And so stochastic scheduling is actually introducing variability around when tasks are going to finish. So instead of having I won't worry about trying the pointer, instead of having a fixed end date of when, blasting block B and drilling block C is going to finish, actually there's a range of times within which that could finish. And when you introduce variability and dependencies, and when I say dependencies, I don't mean scheduling rules and dependencies that we build into our DESWIC schedules and so on, but I mean dependencies in terms of blasting block C can't happen until we've finished drilling block C. And so when you get the combination of variability and dependencies, you actually get this thing that happens that's called slippage, which is indicated by that P50 line where the completion of block C is now actually going to run late. It's a simple fact of life. And if you want to know any more about that, one of my articles on LinkedIn, I think it's about Article 15, I talk about the impact of dependencies and variability on mine plans and how mine plans are never going to finish on time, effectively. It's as simple as that. So from a stochastic scheduling point of view, there are generally 3 things that we're going to think about varying. And so they are the ore body itself, our geological knowledge of it in terms of grades, yields, the quantity of ore that's there, the product grades that we're going to get out and so on. The operating time, so the time usage model or the calendar or whatever it is, so that can vary, things such as wet weather and all those sorts of things. And the third one that we're going to vary is productivity, so in terms of our actual production rates. So stochastic scheduling will vary sort of 1, 2 or any 3 of those in the scheme of things and run multiple simulations to then get an idea of what is the potential outputs from our planning perspective. Now, I'm not going to talk about the mechanics of stochastic scheduling itself, other than that very quick explanation there, because there's a couple of guys giving a presentation in an hour or two's time who are much smarter than me and much better at it than me. I just tend to know sort of surface level versus details. So what I wanted to talk about instead was why we should think about stochastic scheduling. And so the first thing for me is almost like a no-brainer, and that it just represents reality, right? We get variability that happens in our mining operations, and we get heaps of variability that happens in our mining operations. For us to continue to schedule these single point assumptions around how long things are going to take and then want to hold people accountable to it is actually sort of, again, as I said earlier, it's kidding ourselves. As I sort of talked about in that previous slide, it allows us to understand the impact of variability. When you run deterministic schedules, everything runs to plan, everything fits together nicely, and you can't actually understand the impact of variability out of a deterministic schedule. And you also can't understand the impact of dependencies or other things in terms of, what's the effect that they are going to have on your schedule. The third one, and this to me is probably the biggest one of the 5 that I've got listed here, and there's a lot more than the 5, but to me this is probably one of the main ones, and that it allows us to assess risk. And so from a deterministic schedule point of view, I've been thinking for a while about how we can understand what is our probability of achieving our schedule. So we can take all our input assumptions in terms of calendars and production rates and all those sorts of things. We could look at all our equipment and we could work out the probability of each one of those items of equipment achieving what we've used in the plan. That's easy in the scheme of things. But then when you take that and you put that in a schedule and you consider the degrees of freedom that we have in our schedules in terms of moving things around when things don't go to plan, all these other variabilities that affect the schedule in terms of things such as the amount of inventory that we carry and all those sorts of things, they all vary our likelihood of hitting plan. And so much as we can take all of our input assumptions and we can put probabilities around those, at the moment from a deterministic schedule point of view, I haven't come across turning that into what's the probability of us hitting plan. Because for me, that's what it's all about, right? We're a 40% chance of hitting plan, or we're a 60% chance of hitting plan, or whatever it is. And I mentioned at the beginning, one of the greatest other crimes that there is optimistic mind plans. I have this real thing about optimistic mind plans. I think that it is the one thing that has got worse in the 30 years that I've been in the industry, the amount of stretch that we build into our mind plans now. Now, wouldn't it be great if as a mind planner I could do a base plan based on assumptions of what I think is actually gonna happen, and then the GM or the CEO or someone comes along and says, no, I don't like those numbers, I want to use a different set of numbers instead. Wouldn't it be awesome if I could say, well, that's fine, but you've just taken our probability of hitting plan from a 45% to a 25%. So, we can run with those if you like, but you're taking the risk and not me to some extent, because, the risk often falls back on the mind planner, right? And so that's for me. I really like the fact that out of stochastic scheduling, we can basically get a risk assessment. What's our likelihood of hitting plan? We can see the key decisions that happen in the plan and what the impacts of those are. You can't see that in a deterministic schedule. So for example, you might run 100 simulations, you might look at the bottom 20 and see what's the common denominator between those ones that are, where we're missing plan by a long way. And therefore, where are the particular areas of risk in our mind plan? And then lastly, we can actually know where to invest effort. I sort of think about return on investment of effort. So, from a mind planning perspective, we can run stochastic schedules, we can understand where the risk is in our schedules, we can understand what's the difference if we change our inventories. If we were to build more inventories, for example, this is just one example, if we were to build more inventories, what does that change in terms of our likelihood of hitting the planned tons that we're supposed to get, versus the low inventories that we run at or whatever. There are all of those sorts of things that you can assess out of stochastic scheduling that you can't out of a deterministic schedule. So we can know where to invest effort. So thanks everyone for listening to me bang on about variability and risk and so on. It's not a stochastic scheduling, the shift from deterministic to stochastic scheduling is not a simple journey. I actually think there's a lot of change management in the process, but from my perspective, it's something that it's inevitable. It has to happen at some point in time. If we're going to get serious about improving mind planning, we have to move from the deterministic to the stochastic world. And so, hopefully I've maybe hopefully convinced a few people in the room to sort of think about that a bit further in terms of that shift from deterministic to stochastic.
Thanks for listening to Mind Planning Matters and my thoughts on mind planning. This podcast is for the benefit of the mining industry, and that's you. So I'd love to hear from you through the comments section, and please feel free to let me know any topics you'd like discussed in future episodes. You'll find much more content at our Insignia Mining website, And if you find any of our content valuable, please let your mining colleagues know so they can benefit as well.